Hey, before we get into today's conversation, I have a favor to ask you. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. This is our chance to learn more about you and what you want from CityCast so we can serve you and this city better. If you took it last year, thank you for doing that, but we need some new fresh data this year. So go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long. We timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some CityCast Philly swag. Head over to citycast.fm/survey right now. All right, let's get into today's episode. Earlier this month, lawmakers in Harrisburg passed the state budget. And while more money is going to support startups and life sciences, rape crisis centers, and cost of living adjustments for retired teachers and police and firefighters, lawmakers now are shifting their focus to other issues in their district. I'm sitting down with Democrat State Representative Andre Carroll. He represents parts of Germantown, Logan, and West Oak Lane neighborhoods. And we're talking about his first bill getting signed into law and some of his other legislative priorities. It's Wednesday, July 22nd. I'm Trinae Nuri, and we're talking politics. Well, State Rep Andre Carroll, thank you so much for being here on CityCast Philly. Now that the state budget is passed, and I always say, thank God, it didn't take too long. It took some time, but it didn't take as long as it did last year. I'm curious, what actually do you do during the day now that the state budget has passed and you are all on your summer recess?
Yeah, Trinae, that's a really great question. And a lot of people under the impression that like once we pass the state budget and we're no longer traveling 90 miles, well, at least for me, who coming from Philadelphia County, traveling 90 miles west to the state capital, that, we just don't have we just have time to just lounge around. That's not true. So, representing 66,000 people in the state house, I have opportunity when we are away from the state capitol over the summer to do community engagement, to knock some doors, to communicate what exactly is in the state budget. Also to do some community events. We got some coming up in the next few weeks, like Bell Food Day, also a couple back to school
happening
drive.
On Saturday.
Absolutely. Yep. Tuber Air is coming. So super excited to have like Philadelphia's own, a young up and coming artist from Philadelphia coming to the neighborhood rec center that I grew up in, where I learned how to swim. I learned how to use the swing and play basketball, and where I spent many nights in that rec center as a kid. So it's exciting to be able to invest and, bring light and then joy, black joy to the same rec center that I grew up in. So I'm excited about Saturday.
Representative Carroll, as a freshman lawmaker, you have been able to get your first bill signed into law. Tell me a little bit about HB 1646. It's known as the barbershop bill, which you're the prime sponsor of.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to take a step back and talk a little bit about, how I got here, why this is important to me. And I always tell people that like my service is centered in the fact that my father spent the first 20 years of my life in prison. And, I didn't meet my father until a month shy of my 21st birthday. So I ran on a criminal justice reform background. And, I've spent the last 8 years mentoring and working with juveniles who are being tried as adults. Some refer to as Act 96, or you may hear direct file. But these are juveniles between the ages of 15 and 17 who are being tried as adults. So all of whom is on state road inside of places like RCF, Riverside Correctional Facility. And then when they turn 18, they were sent over to PIC and over to CFCF for those who are familiar. So that's the premise of, my background and what charged me to run for office. When it comes to HB 1646, it's really reforming a process in which people get licensed to become barbers. For many, especially like men, like barbershops is where we go to have safe spaces, and many of whom small business owners are also just as impacted folks. These are people who have formerly spent time in custody, and many of whom are coming home to be honest, law-abiding citizens, and they just want to get to work. And what I recognized was that this board, which of one of about 29 boards in the Pennsylvania in Pennsylvania in the Commonwealth, this was one of the boards where it required a majority of the available seats to be able for them to create a quorum and for them to meet. But 19 of the 29 boards already have a simple majority of the occupied seats. And because of the way that this board was currently constructed, it wasn't allowing meetings to happen. So if one person was sick or couldn't make it to the meeting, and these also are volunteer positions on these state boards. If one person couldn't make it, then it would be a 3 month delay because many times we're only seeing them meet quarterly. So if this board could meet, you're seeing delays in applications, you're seeing delays in approvals, denials, and also delays in if there's any corrective action that's need to be taken, towards a barber. All this is being delayed. And, to me, this is personal because my barber has been cutting my hair for about 17 years now.
Where do you get your
Justice
hair cut?
Hereafter Lounge. So it's actually one of the spots that we're having my back to school drive on. That is actually August 15th from 10 to 2.
Where's the barbershop?
It's going to be, is at 18th and Shelton. Don't have the correct address in front of me, but it's right off of Old Gonson Stanton, right behind Wagner Middle School. And yeah, that's where I've been going. He actually just opened up the shop about 2 years ago in the district. Before that, I was traveling across town to get my hair cut. So I'm excited to have him here.
That's special to have that relationship with your barber. Again, help me to understand this. So this bill would expedite barbering licensing or make sure that the board that oversees these licenses meet more frequently?
Yep. So basically, what my bill does makes the requirement to create a quorum a simple majority. So right now there's 11 possible seats on this board. There's only 6 occupants right now occupying these 11 seats. So the majority of 11 is 6. So if one person can't meet, the meeting doesn't happen. But my bill simply takes the majority of the occupied seats. So now out of 6, you only need 4 people to be able to meet, and now the meeting can happen. So 2 people cannot be present, and this would allow the board to be able to function, which then would move forward the process to be able to for people to get licensed. Also, we're experiencing already inside of the Commonwealth, there's already a lack of access to testing sites. So on top of right now, before this bill was passed, people are experiencing about 6 months delay to even take the test, right? And then after they take the test, then if the meeting can't happen, you're talking about another 3 to 6 or sometimes a year later, you're actually then getting your application approved. This is not helpful. This is an impact to tax revenue, is an impact to household incomes. And it's a full cycle impact if we don't make the correction. So I'm excited that the bill has now made it to the governor's desk. Josh Shapiro, the governor here in Pennsylvania, has signed the bill, so it has become law. And I'm excited. It took us about a year to get it done, but we got to do it.
Okay, so it is law now.
It is. It got signed earlier this week into law by Governor Shapiro.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Breaking news. Okay, Representative, you also have a bill, which you're the primary sponsor for, and it's HB 2512.
Yep.
Basically, a surveillance pricing bill, which focuses on rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft. These companies look at user data like our battery power percentage, our browsing history, even our location to determine the highest price that we're willing to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about why you're sponsoring this bill and what's the status of it.
Yeah, Trinae, absolutely, exactly what you said. So last summer, I read a report that literally described exactly what you just mentioned. And it said that, like, if me and you could be standing in the same exact location, and because my battery life may be 10% and yours is at 100, they would charge me more because of my desperation to get a ride. Recognizing that because I'm on 10%, I may not cancel the ride. You being on 100%, you have the capacity to say, look, I'm not going to pay that amount. I can wait a little longer.
Or switch between apps. People do that.
Absolutely.
I'll check the other app if it's cheaper.
Exactly. That happens.
Right,
I've done that, right? Many of us who use rideshare companies have done that. And also, they can use your purchase history, the fact that you've paid this amount on another website. They have access
even
to
when
those
you say, like, when you hit that button where it's like, you can ask the app not to track you.
Well, most people, if you recognize, they just hit allow because a lot of people are under the impression if I hit don't, then I won't have access to the app. So it's kind of like a human behavior thing because we we're just trying to get to access the thing that we're trying to access. So many have allowed companies to be able to surveil us in that way. But this bill literally takes that option away here in the Commonwealth, making sure that like rideshare companies are not allowed to do that. Even if a user was to hit allow, they wouldn't have access to these information. I just believe that right now, especially when we're having an affordability crisis across the country, we're seeing people also in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania still work for $7.50. Like, this is just starvation wages. And I just think that corporations need to be operating in the right honest way. Now, look, I'm not taking away the option if they wanted to, if it depending on the amount of drivers that's on the road, or maybe inclement weather, those kind of things, or maybe the amount of users that are using the app at the time. Those are contributing factors that may fluctuate the price, but you can't overprice someone simply because their battery life is low, or because they've paid historically, more for other products. I just don't think that that's fair. So, actually, Pennsylvania will become the first state in the country to be able to make these limitations if this bill was to pass the state senate in the fall, and makes it to the governor's desk.
And how would that impact drivers though, right? Because they are making a living off these apps as well.
Yep. Absolutely. So, you're also speaking to a person who drove a Lyft and Uber to pay my way through college. When I was in college, I didn't have a person who could fund my education. So I literally drove Uber and Lyft to be able to make ends meet. And, sometimes ends didn't get met. But so I recognize the importance of, this opportunity for people who are working class, people who are using this app. But this these limitations and these safeguards wouldn't impact the paychecks of the drivers. That's not what this would do. This would put regulations on the actual corporation. This is not, a passenger tax. This is not a driver penalty. This is simply making sure that it's equitable for everyone. And if you talk to a driver anytime soon, you'll hear them say that even the way that the system is currently set up, you can be charged $30 for a ride, and the driver may see $12. So there's already a discrepancy, and as far as like how much users are paying and how much the drivers are actually seeing already. This wouldn't change that.
And so, what are the next steps of HB 2512?
Yep. So when we go back in the fall, which we're scheduled to go back to end of September right now, the goal is to get the Consumer Protections Committee over in the Senate to take up this bill. And if they were, and it passed the committee, then it would go to a floor vote on the Senate floor. And then if it passed there, then it will get sent to the governor's desk.
All right. We've got more with State Rep Andre Carroll after this break. Okay, Representative Carroll, you and I spoke a while ago before about your focus on criminal justice and your time that you've spent visiting prisons in the state, because this issue is so close to you. So I'm curious to know more about your involvement with another House bill. This is House Bill 2154, and it essentially would establish the Prison Industry Enhancement Authority. Talk to me a little bit more about, uh, your experience with visiting prisons in the state, and what will this bill help alleviate?
Yep. HB 2154 is actually authored, and the prime sponsor is the chairman of the judiciary, which is Tim Briggs out of Montgomery County. So I sit actually on a judiciary committee. So I have an opportunity to vote this bill out of committee. And this bill essentially would allow private businesses to be able to work in collaborations with prisons here in the Commonwealth and be able to pay livable wages to people who are currently incarcerated. And what we've seen, like in Philadelphia prisons, one of the things that folks don't know is that the furniture in City Hall, the water bills that are sent to our homes, these are manufactured by people who are currently incarcerated. And
Mm.
the thing is that the wages are low. Like you can get paid 50 cents an hour, because legally in prisons, because they're providing housing, they're providing food, they deem that you can be paid less than minimum wage because they're providing, uh, you know, living.
Other living expenses
Existence,
for you
yep,
for you.
exactly. So this would give an opportunity for inmates to be able to work with private businesses, to be able to create jobs, to make sure it's livable wages, also teach career skills that would give them access to that. And then it also will require state oversight so that we will be able to see the pros and the cons of this program.
What sorts of jobs would people who are incarcerated do in for these private companies?
So the jobs are a private business. So, a private business are businesses that are not controlled by like the public sector. So it could simply be if it was like making baby bottles for, instance, that is something that would come from a private business. If it was, for instance, manufacturing, I mentioned earlier, desks and chairs, right? That could be made by a private company. So anything that's in the private sector, that is I'm assuming would be a product, because it'd be unlikely that incarcerated folks would do services, but manufacturing a product, those would be the things that would be available for incarcerated folks to be able to manufacture and get paid a living wage for.
And you also mentioned skills. Are these skills that folks who are incarcerated can use when they get out, when they re-enter back in Philadelphia?
Absolutely. So, job training is a part of the bill, right? Is making sure that people are equipped to be able to do these jobs. And the hope is that majority of the folks who enter prison and jail are folks who are going to return to society at some point. So these are transferable skills, transferable, soft skills and hard skills that people are going to return back to their communities with and allow them to be functioning law-abiding citizens.
Okay. I will be honest. I want to talk about another bill. This one really sparked my interest because I guess I didn't think about it so much and how we're all using AI in some way, but this takes it to a more intimate use of AI. Representative, please break this down. Why is this important
Look,
for people to know?
the first thing first, right, is that AI is here. AI isn't going anywhere. And on a daily increase, we're increasing the amount of users daily of how many people are using AI. So you're talking about HB 2006, 2006, which is my colleague's representative Melissa Schusterman, who has authored this bill. And this is just simply making AI be honest. Literally saying that, like, for instance, a report came out that said on average about 20 million Americans daily are engaging with companionship with AI. These are people who literally know that they're engaging in intimacy with a person that is AI. That's not
What,
a
like asking AI like dating questions or help me to fix this relationship with my mother or whatever.
Absolutely. And like I literally seen a video a few months ago that literally was talking about they were doing speed dating. This was up in New York. They had like a speed dating cafe of literally of all AI folks. Like you can go in the cafe, engage with AI, and like speed date. And people are taking these relationships outside of this cafe and they're okay with dating AI. Look, people have preferences and they have opportunities to do the things that they like, and we're not here to judge that. What I'm here to do is make sure that there are safeguards put in place to make sure that our children are protected, right? The AI is being truthful. And if a person is discussing things like the S word, like, unaliving theirself, or self-harm or harm to others, is that there's a mandate that is being reported to something that allows us to intervene and save lives.
Like I'm curious like why you're connected to this bill.
So, the thing is, I recognize that this is a reality for folks. I've seen some of the stories nationally. And then also too, like I have people have expressed to me, like, look, I don't know the warning signs of AI, and people are running away from AI, and some people are leaning into AI. And what I recognize as a leader is that this isn't something that's going to, weather anytime soon. This is actually only going to get increasingly more potent in our communities and our everyday life. So, as a leader who is predicting the future and seeing a trend, I want to be a part of the solution. And, Representative Schusterman is a good friend. And that's someone who I truly believe in the leadership of, and, someone who I've seen bring a meaningful pieces of legislation forth. And this is one of the things that I have a 17-year-old little brother. I have a 9-year-old little sister. And, they explore the same internet that you and I use, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of the websites that are available to you and I, and there is nothing that stops a 17-year-old or a 9-year-old from being able to enter and leave the websites that you and I use. And I see some of the dangers in real time. And then also, these are not just the dangers of real people; these are the dangers of AI, which is not human beings, and that also we haven't seen the full effects of what this is actually going to be. So we need to get in front of this. And historically, Pennsylvania, in my opinion, has been one of the states that's been behind the eight ball, and we've been one of the states that have been very reactive to constituents and their everyday concerns. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to get ahead of the eight ball and really be one of the states leading around this issue.
Well, now that you brought that up, how do you stay connected to your constituents?
Yeah, so I've actually only been here for 22 months.
Oh, 22 months. Okay.
It
Okay.
haven't even, yeah, it hasn't been a full term yet. So, I'm one of the youngest state lawmakers in the General Assembly here in the Commonwealth. And, one of the things I really pride myself on is that, like, I try to keep my ear to the ground. I spend a lot of time on social media. I spend a lot of time in my community knocking doors. Like literally this summer, my team and I have knocked over 5,000 doors already. And this is just constituent doors from that we started in June. Not even considering the doors that we may have knocked earlier this year in our primary, which we knocked over 85% of the district, and not including the doors that we'll knock the rest of the summer. Last summer, we did the same thing. We knocked over 10,000 doors last year, and we wasn't even in an election year. And, one of the things that I heard a lot when I was running for office is people say, like, look, elected officials, politicians, or whatever like title you want to use, they only show up when it's an election time, or you can only find them when they're asking for your vote. And I said, if
Isn't
I'm
that real to the do you feel like they're saying some sort of truth to
no,
that though?
that's 100%, 110% the truth. And,
Mhm.
I never was groomed to run for office. Like I mentioned, I come from a background where my father was incarcerated the first 20 years of my life. My mother's battled with substance abuse. I was raised by a single parent grandmother who was an LPN, who I, missed many hours and days with because my grandma was working a job, a full-time job down at Henneman Hospital before the closure. And, I recognized that I had very semblance of my neighbors, folks who feel like there's a disconnect between government and everyday folks. And what I promised was that, if elected, I would have the opportunity to change the connection and access to government, and also change the perception of what government can mean to the community that I came from.
How do you think you're doing that?
Engaging. I want to listen. I want to be very responsive to the needs of the people, the people who pay our paychecks, the people who pay taxes unwillingly. The reality is that, when you go to work, you and I, taxes are taken out our checks, regardless if we want to or not. We have no control over that. That is an automatic thing, right? And the reality for me is that that is what funds government. That is what allows us to fund critical programs across the Commonwealth. That is what allows me to be able to have a paycheck and pay my bills. So I have a responsibility, right, to the people who have elected me, and beyond, because I'm elected within a district that is comprised of 66,000 people, but every single vote that I take affects all 13 million Pennsylvanians, and I recognize that, and I take that very seriously. And for me, I want to make sure that I'm providing services to the best of my ability. There's people who will write me on Facebook and Instagram, and I take constituent services. One night, I remember it was a Friday night. I was at an event. It's like 11 o'clock at night, and a woman who lives down the street from the office, she wrote me on Facebook telling me that she was experiencing an outage with Pico. Her electricity was off. And, immediately I picked up the phone and I reached out to my contact over at Pico, and I said, hey, I have a neighbor. This is the address. Her power has been off for about 4 hours. They said that the power would have been back on in an hour. It hasn't happened. And within an hour of that conversation, her electricity was back on. That is the kind of level of constituent services that I believe that my neighbors deserve, and that's what I could aim to continue to provide.
Hmm. I want to get back to just engagement a little bit more with constituents, with voters. So the city's commissioner's office, they launched a summer voter registration effort in neighborhoods throughout the city to get people registered to vote and apply for mail-in ballots and answer any election-related questions. What have you heard from your constituents about maybe some of the misconceptions of the election process? Because we've got midterms coming up. You're going to be up for reelection. What do you think are some of the misconceptions of the election process among voters in your district? And how can you address those?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening right now, right? Watch, we literally a few nights ago, we just watched the president of the United States literally take out 30 minutes of his time and our time and provide an address to add, misconceptions and like accusations with no proof about election fraud and people who've been able to vote that should not have been able to vote and all this other foolishness. That's one thing, right? We have a president who's running this country right now who literally is determined to make folks believe that elections are unsecure, they're not safe, and that's just not true. The thing is, I've ran for office, I've lost an election, I ran for office, and I won an election. I know that they work because I know how many doors we knocked, I know how much money we spent to engage with voters, and I've seen the outcomes, right? The other thing that I'll say is that, shout out to the Philadelphia City Commissioner's office for, their attempts to be able to engage, Philadelphians in the voting process. The thing that we'll say, right, is that we have seen historically a decline in voter engagement. And the thing that
Right.
you know for a fact for people that people are exhausted with the notion that we must vote because of our ancestors or we must vote because that's how we elect our leaders. And then there's no results or there's a lack thereof when we do go out and vote. I totally get people's sentiments and their frustration. The thing that I truly believe is that while we do have a need to register people to vote, I think the biggest issue that we have is that we have a turnout issue, that we're not turning out people
Absolutely. Right.
because we're losing people's trust and their faith in government.
And
Go
then
back.
to some extent, though, I'm gonna push back a little bit on that, right? And to some extent, uh, some argue that that has helped the Democratic Party here in the city of Philadelphia because of low voter turnout. You can almost expect that if you're the Democratic candidate, and sometimes if you're the incumbent, you're locked in that seat.
Yeah, I mean, I went through that, right? I ran against a Democratic incumbent, and it was because I felt that like any Democrat won't do. That's what I truly believe. Like, just because I believe in the Democratic Party, I've been a Democrat all my life, but just because someone has a D next to their name doesn't make them the best person for the seat. We need to elect champions for working class people. We need to elect champions for youth and for seniors. We need to elect people who actually want to come into these roles and do the job. But one thing that I know for a fact is that we need as many people to participate in elections because it's not just about my down ballot election here in Germantown. It's about also what about when the state senator, what about when the congressional member runs, or what about the governor or president? Sometimes those elections happen on a different cycle. Every time that Andre Carroll is on a ballot, Governor Shapiro may not be on a ballot, or uh, you know, Vice President Democratic nominee Kamala Harris may not be on a ballot all at the same time. So what happens when the folks that's in this district doesn't turn out for those elections? And then we see people who are elected to office, which are the people that we do not want. The only way we can consistently make sure that we're electing leaders and champions for folks like our community is that we have to continue to talk to folks. Another thing too, like one of the things I recognize when you're running a campaign, there's this thing that happens. It's called you create a universe, and inside this universe, you're determining what voters to reach out to. So say for instance, if I'm running my campaign in cycle and a person has only voted one time in the last four elections, and we're talking about Philadelphia where elections happen every 6 years. So that means in the last 2 years, this person has only voted one time. A campaign could deem that person as a low propensity voter and as someone who they shouldn't reach out to because they can't count on that person to be able to show up on election day. So what they're going to do is they're going to focus on a person who may have voted three out of the four last elections. A four out of four voter is someone who's voted every election for the last 2 years, and that's the person that they really want because they believe that that person can get to the polls. But my thing is, what about the people who have decided to disengage with the system for whatever reason that may be? How, if you don't get them back into the fold, then that means campaigns will stop voting out, start reaching out to them in their entirety, and we'll never be able to get them back in the fold. I operate from a different, vantage point. I believe that those voters deserve outreach and we can get them back in the fold, but you can't do that if you don't talk to them. And the way that which my team, my office operates is that like when we're out knocking doors, we knock every door. These are constituent service door knocks. We're knocking every door to let people know that, look, one, we exist. These are the services that we offer. And we're not here to ask for your vote. Today, we just want to let you know what government can do for you in the hopes that you will engage with us in a way that allows us to be able to then reach out to you at a later date.
What is keeping you in politics?
I mean, I mean, As a kid, I could tell you, my grandma. I used to walk with my grandmother to the voting booth every election. My grandma was an avid voter, and I always heard these folks' names. I would see the commercials, and I never thought that I would have an opportunity to run for office. And
Why?
I think about that, Trinae. I think about the reason why. It was because I didn't see people like myself. I didn't see young elected officials. I didn't hear stories like the one that I come from. I didn't see those success stories exist in this space. I grew up in a world in which folks like myself only went on to play basketball, football. We were athletes. And maybe sometimes like we were musicians. But to actually be in public policy, my story didn't exist. To have a young, poor black boy from Germantown who was raised in a household that made less than $50,000 a year, in a zip code where the average person makes less than $40,000 a year in today's society with this affordability crisis, that wasn't a reality. And oftentimes I thought to myself, a person like me can never run for office. But I recognize that there is a world in which my story is possible, and there's an opportunity for me to take lived experience to the capitals and to the Hall of Power and be able to make real meaningful policy changes that really impact everyday folks right here in the Commonwealth. And that is the reason why I continue to wake up every day and want to do this job. I really do thoroughly enjoy the role that I have as a Pennsylvania lawmaker, and the opportunity to see in real time what the challenges are, what the problems with government are, the gaps, and finding ways to be able to lead the charge to be able to change that. I've seen in just 22 months some of the energy and impact that my team and I have been able to curate and create. I've seen that spread in other folks. I've seen it wake some of my colleagues up and be like, look, we don't have to do status quo. We don't have to live which in a way that the systems have deemed our reality. We can actually reimagine a world that we all are proud to live in, a world in where we all can thrive and have access to economic mobility, and have opportunity to raise children right here in our community, send them to public schools, and be able to lower the count of folks who are incarcerated in the Commonwealth, and really set people on a path of success and make sure that our seniors have access to affordable health, prescription costs and healthcare for all. These are things that are possible, and we've seen it. We've seen across the country. We've seen people get elected. Right now, we're watching a mayor in the biggest city in America, New York City, who is a Muslim, who is in his 30s, who is a democratic socialist, and a person who's an immigrant, literally serve as mayor and transform the biggest city in America underneath a Donald Trump presidency. You cannot tell me that it's not possible. There's not an opportunity to do better. We've seen it. We can do it. We just have to elect people who actually want to do better.
Would you consider yourself a democratic socialist?
I consider myself a champion of the people. I believe that communities like the one I come from, I think far too often we've been boggled down with titles. We've been separated by the fact that this person is this and this person is that. At the end of the day, I want to be a champion for people. I recognize the struggles that my neighbors are having, and I want to make sure that I'm running towards a goal line with them in mind and making sure that I'm taking all of them with me. I promised them that I was gonna put my neighborhood on my back, and I was gonna get them everything that they deserve, and that's what I wake up every day with the intentions of doing.
Okay, so what sorts of other things are you going to be doing this summer until the House convenes in September?
Yep. So this Saturday, July 25th, we're doing Belfield Day. We talked about this a little bit earlier, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., which is just a day of joy. I mentioned Philadelphia's own artist, Too Rare, is coming out to perform, and I'm excited to have him in my neighborhood. Also,
I saw
we
you doing was it the Camden Bop?
The Camden Bob. Yeah, I'm still practicing. So if you
Yeah.
see the videos on my social media, that's just my attempt to try to, learn to dance before Too Rare gets to get to Belfield, so I could be on the stage and, try to participate a little bit. Which is, another thing, right? It's like just making sure that like I'm trying to stay current, right? I'm trying to make sure that like I'm keeping up with the Joneses and the young folks.
Wait,
Yeah,
how old are you?
I'm 35. I'm
Oh,
35.
okay.
Yeah, but I can tell you that politics age you and government is stressful. So,
You got
so
gray hairs yet?
we ain't gonna talk about that. We can throw that. But also I want to mention that we got some back to school drives on August 1st at Lonnie Young Rec Center. We also August 15th, which is going to be a hair after barbershops, small business, and then also on August 25th, we're going to be at Thorn Beauty and Company in Logan. Which is also another small business, and we're going to be doing a back to school drive there. So we want to make sure that, full young people in all three neighborhoods that I represent have access to back to school materials, book bags, rulers, crayons, everything that you can think of. We're going to have it. And then we're also going to have some resources out there for the parents when they come out, if there's anything that we can help with. So excited for all of that. So that's just some of the stuff that we'll be doing before we go back to session in September.
All right. PA Representative Andre Carroll, thank you so much for speaking with me on CityCast Philly.
All right, thank you so much, Trinae. It's been an honor and a joy. I'm glad that we made it happen, and I'm glad I got a chance to share some of the work that we've been doing. I appreciate you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode with State Representative Andre Carroll, share this with your neighbor. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Philly. All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.